people knowing you're there. And I don't want, you're not going to cost you any money to ring the bell, but you can promote yourself and your business. All you have to do is put up a sign. You can attach it to this sign. You can wear your name tag. You can wear any kind of apparel you have. Is that your shirt? Is that your shirt? It is. You can wear that shirt and my volunteer apron and ring the bell. People say, "Well, that's all about," and you'd be able to tell them. Spend 2, 3, 4 hours is all it would take. Scott Smith, who does reverse mortgages, was here a couple of weeks ago. He spent some time on Saturday and rang the bell for us and raised nearly $200 in just 3 hours. And by nearly $200, I mean $1.25 short of $200. So it was right at $200. And he just spent 3 hours greeting people and saying hi to them and answering their questions if they had any about his business. The same thing can go for each and every person in here. It can be a weekend, it can be a weekday, it can be a morning, it can be an afternoon, it can be an evening. You don't have to really set much time aside, 2, 3, 4 hours is all, and make it when you can do it. Don't be a crush on you, but literally hundreds of people will walk by you while you're ringing the bell. Hundreds. It is. It's hundreds of people. Most cases, I can put you inside of a Fred Meyer store where you have a little vestibule, an area where you can talk to people, you can engage them about your business. When somebody comes up and sees this sign and this kettle and you're ringing the bell, they know what this is about. They're not going to ask you any questions about this. Everybody knows what this is about. If they do, the simple answer is all the money that goes in here stays right here in Vancouver. It doesn't go anywhere. This is what we use to provide buildings for professional connections to come and meet on Mondays. By the way, it's going to change on Wednesdays next year. Just kidding. But that's all everybody knows about the Salvation Army. Then what you need to do is tell them about you. Promote yourself, promote your business. Promote, if you have enough customers, promote a club, promote an organization, promote your church. Whatever I have a volunteer who comes every morning at 9 o'clock over to the Fred Meyer store on Milton and Sockle and rings the bell. And this year he wants to promote his church, Emmanuel Baptist. So we're going to get him a sign to hang there that says, I represent Emmanuel Baptist Church. He wants to do a little shout out to his church. You can do the same thing. We'll get you whatever you need to have to make it successful for everybody. Success for us is just having somebody there to ring the bell. So we don't have to pay somebody to do it. So you'd be helping us and you'd be helping yourself. And if you're not sure what you would do, just ask me, I'll help you with that. He said that old thing up there, said Lennington marketing. Well, I used to do that. I was a consultant in a business consultant for years in that area. I know a lot of stuff, but this is simple. Tell your story. Paul and Dan and Brad only give you like 15 seconds to tell your story here. I give you 4 hours. So take advantage of it. Either see me, call me. I'm going to, almost all the rest of the year, I'm going to be right back here at the desk. So you can just stop by and see me. I've got a spreadsheet with locations, times. If anybody has anything they want to do this Wednesday afternoon between 2:20 and 5:30, I've got a spot in Battleground that I really need filled. But that's today's emergency. Is Wednesday afternoon Battleground, Fred Meyer for 3 hours. So if anybody could help there, I'd appreciate it. But any other time you want to do it, mornings, afternoons, evenings, whatever, just give me a call. Paul, please.
Just a couple of clarifications. It doesn't have to be 3 or 4 hours.
Oh, it has to be 5 or 6. Could be good.
You can do an hour, you can do 2 hours, you can do it tandem, you can do it solo, you can bring your family, as Dan has done. It's for those, who else has done it? Who else has rung the bell in here?
I've done it.
So those of you who have not, it really, from my standpoint, it's really a feel-good, because 94 cents, 96 cents of every dollar taken in that kettle goes to public services locally. There's quote, corporate money, close quote, that goes out with the emergency canteens to work in disasters and that kind of thing. But here, they're feeding, they're doing after-school programming, and while the Salvation Army is a church, they don't do a lot of proselytizing. They are here, it's people helping people, which is why I got involved with it. As a matter of fact, when I lived in West Virginia, I was president of my synagogue and the Salvation Army at the same time, because it was people helping people doing God's will. So my suggestion find an hour, find 2 hours, somebody who will stand with you in a warm vestibule. You're not standing outside in the snow or in the rain.
And
in
you're
most
promoting
cases.
yourself.
And yes, you are putting your own best foot forward.
In past, we've just asked people to ring the bell and just be there. But this year, we want you to promote yourself. Because if you're successful promoting yourself, this is going to be so much easier next year. So, anybody have any questions or dates they want to know about?
When,
Last one here, you get to do a battleground Wednesday afternoon at 2:30.
how late through the season are you guys?
We start about 9 in the morning, we end about 7:30 at night. The exact time is varied by store because we have drivers that go around and pick up the kettles.
All the way through Christmas?
Christmas Eve. Saturdays, Sundays, weekdays, mornings, whatever you want to do. We want you to promote yourselves, we want you to be successful.
If we are having an event, do you have any extra kettles that we can set up?
Sure.
Like during the night?
Sure. Or you can have an event and have 3 or 4 people come to the kettle, have your event there.
I think what you need to take a kettle to an event.
Yeah, I have a Black Friday event in my office like for 12 hours, so I'd be happy to take one with me.
Sure, I've got a little tabletop one.
Okay.
Might be good too.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Let me know. Any other questions? Anybody want to sign up right now? IQ Credit Union has signed up for a couple of days. Good for them. All right. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Joe. Our second speaker, going to present, if everybody's screaming, who's listening. Dan was a Cold Warrior, served as a communications intelligence analyst in West Berlin and Augsburg, then as a CID special agent, and did a tour in Saudi Arabia. In 2008-9, he served as a research analyst on human terrain teams in Kirkuk and Baghdad. And after returning from Iraq, arising from his experience with mostly Arabs and Kurds, Sunni and Shia Muslims, Dan solicited local area Muslims as guest speakers for classes and presentations. There's a direct connection from there to where we are today. I'll continue. He's the author, America's Jihad, and he's a Rotarian as a peace builder and as an advocate for veterans and military families, serving on boards for both the Community Military Appreciation Committee and the Columbia River chapter of the Military Officers Association of America. And that's not all, but that's where we decided we'd have to hold it up. Please welcome Dan Sockle.
Thanks very much, everyone. All right, so we're going to talk about my passion today, and that is communications. When communications break down, when distrust and fear take over, and hate and so on, then that's when political tribalism can kick in, and certainly has. And that is certainly a nasty path to be on that can take us to dark places. When I was in Iraq and having been aware of the 2005 elections and the 2009 elections, over there, it's a bit of chaos as we're trying to almost impose a democracy on a very tribal culture. And what they would do frequently is kidnap the opponents that they're up against, sometimes just plain kill them, other times try to get ransom out of that side to fund their own political aims. And we just happen to fall short of the beheadings over here and kidnappings, but otherwise a lot of nukes are being lobbed back and forth. And as you know, truth and facts have suffered greatly in our culture of late. So I like to start things off with Mark Twain's quote, "It ain't what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so." Having been in criminal investigations, civil investigations, having worked with the folks in a variety of levels of conflict, or at least headed that way, mediation, these words resonated with me significantly. Given the challenges that we have in the media today, he also says this: if you don't read the newspaper, you are uninformed. And if you do read the newspaper or follow You were misinformed. So those are the types of things we're up against today, and I'm going to kind of take us on a little bit of a journey through the barrage that's out there that's overwhelming not just us, and I think my generation, probably we can still sort through it a bit, but a lot of our younger generation probably has a bit of a handicap as far as analytical thinking, critical thinking. A good friend of mine who's a lifelong educator and anthropologist, he used to try to teach students to have a crap detector or BS detector. So if everyone's screaming, who's listening? That, of course, is something we can all relate to very quickly. Exploring how our once United States, probably right after 9/11, has become such a divided states of America. So how did we get here, and what can we do about it? And of course, here we are. So I like to consider what I put out to be food for thought. If I get this moving on up, I see it's there in a different font and not agreeing with this. So all, what is the truth and whose truth is it, is what that's saying up there. Everyone, through their own life experience and the various influencers in their life, has their own truth today. As an investigator, we know that we're dealing more often with people's perceptions than necessarily the reality. One of the exercises in almost every investigative training course is where suddenly something happens in the classroom, there's a calamity, and then whoever was involved in the play acting leaves, and then everyone is asked what they saw. And these are up-and-coming investigators that are supposed to be really good at observing, and it teaches them a bit of humility when it comes to that, and gives them an empathy for those that they're going to deal with as witnesses and victims and anyone that might have something to say about an investigation. So I guess we'll go down the line here this way. So we'll go into some of the drivers of discord, distrust, and division, and we're surrounded by it 365, 24/7. Top 14 causes of political polarization. That's going to be a reference to just a 2.5, 3-page. To an article that was written by one of the co-founders of Better Angels, which we'll get into in a little bit, and I've got some handouts for that. Political weaponization of the FBI, Department of Justice, IRS, ATF, CIA, and so on. We've seen that over the years. There's been allegations of past several administrations. It isn't just a Republican or a Democrat thing. It's something that there is a tendency to weaponize. I guess it's the wrong house. We've seen the weaponization politically of offices of influence investigation that can do harm to the other side. We've seen one-sided politics. Whoever's in power, the other side tends to suffer. Which isn't right. There should be checks and balances and so on. So political landscape is changing. We just had an election, and we can go a little bit into that, but I'm going to illustrate some of the role models or lack thereof that we have today. Arguing at the extremes, I'll just comment on that because I don't think there's another slide that prompts it, can anyone tell me the reason why, or the main reason why, our political parties in Congress tend not to be able to resolve major issues, the hot-button issues? Immigration, pro-life, pro-choice.
Different constituencies.
Different constituencies. But if they ever resolve the issue, there's a whole lot of special interest money that no longer comes into the political
That's
office.
one of the constituencies is the money.
And that's the main reason why we've got such a dysfunctional Congress today, and why these major issues just don't get resolved. The can keeps getting kicked down the road.
But it is also the idea that people will get elected. They're looking out for their own welfare.
Yeah.
They make those hard decisions because they have to contend with that.
Yeah, whatever they think
Back at home.
is going to get them the votes at the time, and whether it's gerrymandering that's changed things in the political landscape in their representative district or state, but yes, absolutely.
The parties have become so polarized on some of those issues that I think it's difficult for anyone that's in an elected position, because there's no way that, most people, I don't even think in their own party agree with every single tenet, but like he's saying, if
Yeah.
But
totally.
we've kind of created that system too.
Well, it has evolved over the last 20 years, and that 14 reasons, the top causes of polarization today, there's some reflection on some of that as to how the parties came to be at odds with one another, constantly focused on jockeying for power, even putting the other out of business if they possibly can, instead of tending to the best interests of the American people and the country.
Don't they put their own interests ahead? I'm sorry, don't they put their own interests ahead of the American people?
Yeah, absolutely, politically. The two political tribes, yes, totally. Dignity, mutual understanding, mutual respect are the things we want to work towards. Those are the facilitators of gaining a constructive communication that you respect the others in order to be respected. You do your best to have a genuine curiosity in your questions, not a gotcha type of approach. Differences, okay. We've become a differences-focused country instead of focusing on our common interest or shared values. That's some of the magic sauce that goes into mediation. And we'll go into Better Angels. The NoLabels.org is that not only are there some grassroots initiatives going on today, but in Congress they're making a real effort to try and pull representatives from both political parties into a problem solvers caucus in order to overcome the tribalism that we're seeing today. And yes, Speakers Bureau, that's a local initiative that I'll talk about a little bit. So this one may work, may not, depending on what all you see here. These are all the types of things that right now are dividing us. And I put up there that these are the isms or the phobias that are being exploited for political purposes. Pick out those that might resonate with you the most, and I'll just try and get us through this, because almost anything you can think of, and somewhere along the line I probably forgot something, or the latest buzzword of the day, or the labels that are put on people that either as a group or individually, that just really should not be applied. So united we stand, or once stood, so now what? Oh, it's like Antifa. So these are the faces that our younger generations are seeing today, that we're seeing and are probably sick of seeing, because they are all speaking their own political talking points for their political tribe. And there's too little effort to actually establish a forum that involves mutual respect and mutual understanding, and on the commonalities that we should all share. And this is the leadership or setting the tone in the absence of role models in our community. So the top 14 causes of political polarization, this is just a quick look at them, a couple of highlights.
What's the first one again, Dan?
The first one is the end of the Cold War, no longer a global enemy. And when we've got an external enemy, it's almost human nature that we're going to unite. Right after 9/11 is probably the greatest, most recent example of how united we were against the common enemy, common external enemy. And when that goes away, then we start turning inward. And certainly our free press turns inward and starts becoming a watchdog, maybe a fourth check and balance on our system of governance. But then when it starts acquiring biases and polarization even in the media, then you end up with the exacerbation of propaganda that both sides will put out there and try and manipulate voters. So rise of identity group politics, we certainly have that today, political tribalism. Growing religious diversity, religiously unaffiliated, and some would say that that's an abandonment of some of the values that each of the religions stand for, that they have in common, and instead going to a more secular or even atheist position, not necessarily totally atheist or agnostic, that's not wrong, but into a place that doesn't necessarily value unifying behind a particular value. One of the recent locations we used for a Red Blue workshop, which I'll go into later, what was called the West Hills Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. And that was interesting. Unitarian, I thought, was a step towards trying to bridge the gaps between the various faiths. And now more of a variety of ways that ago, religiously speaking. The passing of the greatest generation. It won't work. Oh. All right, so, oh, that's right. Yeah, TV screens are good for one thing, but not for pointing dead. Passing of the greatest generation, a lot of sacrifices that were made associated with the Great Depression, as well as World War II, and arguably through the Korean War. Geographical sorting, as we kind of looked at each other as regions, or just stereotyping the South, or the mentality in California or in New York City. Political party sorting, and we've seen that in the primaries, as was alluded to back here with a few of the comments. If you dare to reach across the aisle, then your party in the primaries is going to try and get you out because you're not towing the party line. And we've seen that increasingly over the last decade. Then we'll go to the next slide. So, new rules for Congress, erosion of traditions, and so on. The changes in the number of votes that's needed to approve legislation or judge appointments, things of that nature. The varying rules in the Senate relative to filibustering, I think also in the House to a degree, and so on. And that's changed a lot of the traditions. Travel also back and forth, DC and so on. Now Monday and Friday are considered travel days. And so that cuts down on the actual days that our representatives in either house are there working together, or even daring to have dinner together, or build a friendship. The second one is new rules for politicians, parties, and so on. That basically covers what I was just talking about. New political donors, shifting candidates and parties to ideas and ideology. The big money that's in politics today, again, that goes to the special interests and so on. New political districts, widespread gerrymandering, both sides doing it. Spread of the media ghettos, online echo chambers, decline of journalistic responsibility and standards, and growing influences that are polarizing habits of the mind and heart, favoring binary either-or thinking, absolutizing preferred values, seeing uncertainty as a mark of weakness or sin, and always and only seeking evidence supporting your side. So if you just have one news source, or you subscribe to and participate in Facebook and all the political debates that go there, I've gotten to where I'm still on Facebook. Once a week I'll check it. If there's a cute puppy thing that's worthy of sharing, or some words of wisdom that are neutral, I'll share those and pass.
You read all about ours, obviously, huh?
Oh, yeah. All about self-improvement. So, political weaponization is what I alluded to earlier we'd be getting to, and this has certainly been happening. The resist movement that has taken place since the shock that struck our country on November 8, 2016. And our trust in rule of law and the equitable application of our justice system. And it's kind of been turned on its head. I don't know if I put that graphic in. I didn't quite turn her on her head. But it has caused us all to start doubting many aspects of our culture and our country and the direction we're going in. Some of that is perpetrated by the two political parties. A lot of it has been exacerbated by Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, and anyone who sees it to their advantage to make democracy seem that much weaker or the wrong answer, strengthen their system of government and make people believe that they have the right answers and we do not. So the political industrial complex, here's what we're headed for. We've got the aging out generations, and then we have the newcomers, especially on the Democratic side, and the Republicans right now don't necessarily have too many of the newcomers because who's sucking all the oxygen out of the room? That would be the Donald. And sometimes he's even working against himself. So you've got the dynamics there, young versus old, social democrats that have caught on since Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in New York, and the ouster of the next most senior person that likely would have given the competition to the Speaker of the House position had he held on to his small c New York. And then we have other threats, certainly downtown Portland, we see pretty regularly now, almost every weekend. We've got Proud Boys versus Antifa, which came first, the chicken or the egg. A good friend of mine who's very liberal, progressive, proudly so, was insistent that Antifa arose after Charlottesville, and it was to try and protect all of the innocents from the Proud Boys or the white supremacist movement. And I found some articles that had Antifa there as well, and that rendered him silent, at least on that subject. So when we're in those echo chambers, that's the impression that we get, is one side has all the evil and violent people, and the other side is just trying to protect the innocents or to stand up against hate speech. And that has created our safe zones, our sanctuary cities, our sanctuary campuses, and drives us nuts. So my answer to this is every leader of a campus or a city should be first and foremost coming out and saying, I stand for protecting free speech and lawful assembly. And in order to support that and ensure that it occurs in my domain, I am directing our security forces that should anyone show up looking like this, carrying anything that might be used as a weapon, that they should be pulled out under a civil protective custody kind of ordinance and put on ice until the lawful assembly of people with their legitimate free speech rights to be exercised can complete what they came there to do. Seems simple. I think as soon as somebody does it somewhere, I think it'll catch on across the country. That's just one man's opinion. So this from Neil deGrasse Tyson, I thought kind of shapes things up as we move into possible solutions. I dream of a world where the truth is what shapes people's politics, rather than politics shaping what people think is true. So communications, mediation, red and blue workshops is the word there, and nolegals.org. So now we're shifting from the problems and the challenges we have going into some of the potential solutions, or at least what I'm finding to be viable. Nothing's going to change overnight. There's no quick answers, but generationally speaking, or at least over the next decade or so, we might turn the tide on some of this. So conflict is costly. This is a slide that basically talks about, or takes us into mediation, whether it's the individual wrestling with his or her own demons, conflicts, what to do, reflections that are causing consternation, or even some potential mental issues from bipolar disease to otherwise. We've got the whole spectrum in our society, and there is no one size fits all when it comes to trying to address those who might do violence or have conflict with others. Obviously the couples, and then in court, and then on the battlefield. So none of those are good places to be. So, as I alluded to earlier, one of the main goals that we should all have when we're approaching others for communication is to try and achieve higher levels of mutual understanding and mutual respect. That's key. If someone starts feeling insulted or that their dignity has been insulted, then you've turned off a listener, you've lost them. So seek out those commonalities and start focusing on the values that you share in any conversation. Interest-based mediation that separates issues from interests. Issues divide. What is the specific issue that has the two of you at each other's throats? So let's set those issues aside and let's start talking about the common interests that you share, because that brings you back together or starts developing kind of a collaborative approach where you're working towards a common goal. In separated couples, families, parenting plans, putting those kids front and center as something that both parties should be able to say, I want what's best for the kids, and you start building on that. But the same thing can happen in a workplace where it comes to goals, goal setting, and working as a team towards the common goal. So if you're in a position of management or family or wherever you might be in your walk of life, if you find yourself almost in a mediator position or trying to get the sides talking to one another again, then try to find and draw out those shared values and common interests that they might have and build on it accordingly. Why mediation works, we'll go through this pretty quickly. All right. Litigation is the worst scenario because that involves court or involves attorneys representing the parties, and frequently it's out of your control. Both parties, it's in the control of the attorneys, and if it goes to litigation, that's where it's going to cost you the most money. And more. Arbitration is commonly a retired judge, but that's where the parties are listened to a little bit more by the retired judge or the arbiter who goes back and forth. Usually the parties are separate, in separate rooms, labor relations, debates and disputes between management and unions, for instance, might be a component of that. But arbitration, ultimately, the decision is made by one person, the arbitrator. So you still don't have total control of the outcome. In mediation, it's the parties themselves. As mediators, who else is a mediator besides me and Michelle? Okay. Speaking of the choir.
All parents are. All parents are.
Well, yeah, and as our clergy for the most part. And that's a good point, Ron. And we all get into the mix, whether it's as a referee or otherwise. But when you find yourself in that position, you want to try to empower the parties as you're proceeding as a parent or otherwise to get them to buy into what's likely to be a more lasting solution if they are participating in and arriving at some kind of agreement. So which is more likely to provide a solution they can live with. So that's my pitch for mediation, Mediation 101. Effective communications are only as effective as, that's some white font up there, as there are open minds to receive it. And the communications need to flow in all directions. Open dialogue and civil debate. And one of the phrases that I like, somebody pointed out once upon a time, is confrontation. It kind of has a negative connotation in our society. If you're going to confront somebody, then that's the worst last resort. But if you put the word constructive in front of it and constructively confront what the situation is, I think a whole lot of managers out there would be better managers if they constructively confront what's going on in their team, in their workplace, or their organization. Mutual effort to listen, learn, and grow. We should all want to do that every day of our lives. Commonalities versus differences, I've probably beaten you up on that. Shared values, common interests. You've heard all that before. So, goodwill, mutual understanding, mutual respect, and genuine curiosity. And then the bottom line, ultimately, in almost all situations, is treat others as you would want to be treated. And that version of the golden rule sounds a little less preachy, a little less religious overtones for it, in stating that something that's more relatable in many ways. Heroes and role models, where the heck are they? I think we grew up with some, but we see them in sports figures today, not so much. Entertainers, news anchors, political leaders. Can't think of too many in those demographics. So how about teachers, care providers, first responders, veterans, and business professionals?
I wonder who in this room can name anybody currently serving as an astronaut on the space station.
That's good.
And we remember how exciting that was and who those heroes were as that program was taken on.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. And without role models, what are our younger generations going to emulate? When are they going to form realistic, meaningful goals? When are they going to start dreaming realistic dreams and start pursuing the idea of being an astronaut, among other things? So what can you do? Resist and challenge stereotyping. Better Angels workshops, 4 exercises. First one talks about stereotyping. Community dialogue, there's many forums for that. Outreach to those on the front lines, by that I mean our first responders, whether they're military, police, medical response, firefighters. Those are the folks that are engaging in or dealing with conflict every day and probably have a lot of answers to the table. Bless you. Another example is join or start a Crime Stoppers group. This community right now is happy to piggyback on Portland's Police Bureau Crime Stoppers, but when I was in Olympia and Thurston County, we had a very engaged Crime Stoppers group that was a good cross-section of the community.
As does Vancouver and Clark County with Neighbors on Watch.
Both forms of it, yep.
So there are a lot of volunteer organizations, people get involved.
What Crime Stoppers brings in that isn't captured in that and some of the other school programs is they've got a cross-section striving for all religions in the community, ethnicities to have a representation. And they extend it to those in the criminal justice hierarchy, as in our prosecuting attorneys and so on. And perhaps most importantly, they get the media involved. And so the media is there. Whenever the different organizations I've been involved in, if the law enforcement agencies that are there can't either apply the resources that are needed or develop a criminal case, then the media participating would start doing education of the public types of articles or announcements on TV to make folks better aware of the scams and the fraudsters that are out there. So it can serve many good purposes. Join a school board, assess key curriculum and texts, model United Nations assemblies, those programs are great, and civics needs to come back into our K through 12. It's huge that we've got these new generations that really don't know what they're protesting against or what the answers might be, or what's constitutional and what's not. Heck, even members of the political parties are calling things unconstitutional or in a constitutional crisis. Wait a minute. In some cases, they might be right. In other cases, it's just political talking points, and it's not healthy. So, Better Angels, Red and Blue Workshops, Portland Area Guest Speakers Bureau, and you'll see back on the table, and the last time I was here, I put interest forms. If you're interested in talking to our younger generations in schools, did I just get like a 5 minute? I saw your arm go up.
Oh, no.
That's an effort by Rotary and Community Military Appreciation Committee and groups like this to bring forth our professionals that have real life experiences, whether it's in the STEM professions and science and so on, or whether it's something that can interject yet another role model into our classrooms and have a positive influence on our younger generations. No Labels, Problem Solvers Caucus in DC, I've talked about that already. This I thought I moved down. This is kind of aimed at Rotary, but there are a lot of things that Rotary does. I'm not going to give you an all-out pitch on Rotary. There's many good civic organizations out there. All right, so this one might be challenged. This is the overview of Better Angels. Better Angels is a national citizens movement to reduce political polarization in the United States by bringing liberals and conservatives together to understand each other beyond stereotypes, forming red-blue community alliances, teaching practical skills for communicating across political differences, and making a strong public argument for depolarization. It started about 2 years ago, and it has grown now to where there's 36 states involved with alliances that are approaching, I think, 10,000 members, and it is working its magic. But one of the biggest challenges is convincing most of the conservatives to come out of the shadows and admit that they have some conservative leanings, with a belief, a perception, that the far left or more liberal folks would immediately label them as having voted for Trump. And if you voted for Trump, that means you're being a racist and right on that one. So one of the magical things that comes out of these is each side learning that they didn't necessarily vote the party line, that they are really more in the center, more purple or pink, as we might call it, in that spectrum. And they learn a lot about how we are all being manipulated, whether it's by our political tribes or by media. So that's the main effort of it, and that's what the Better Angels thing is about. My contact information is at the bottom of that. Now, to give hope that it isn't just our grassroots movements, such as Better Angels, there's also through meetup.com, you can find groups such as Crossing Party Lines, Unite America, Friends of Abe, and others that the name pretty much implies, which is ways to have that conversation that isn't happening at the national level, and certainly not in the media. So back there in Congress in 2010, there was an effort started to try and get these Democrats and Republicans away from the party line, working more together in a bipartisan way to problem solve. So they developed the Problem Solvers Caucus. In 2012, after that election that year, and John Huntsman was washed out early from the Republican side because he was deemed to be too much of a traitor for having been the ambassador to China under President Obama. He was deemed to be just too liberal. And there was no toleration or tolerance for being moderate and being centrist. And that, as we've seen, has become the modus operandi of our two major parties. But he reached out to Senator Joe Manchin, Senator Joe Lieberman, Evan Bayh was another, as they formed this message of let's set aside our labels as Democrats or Republicans and let's start working together. So it died a little bit after 2016. I was probably among the folks that was hoping that they would put forth a ticket to counter the worst ever choices that we had on November 8, 2016. But now they're getting a little traction once again, and maybe Better Angels and some of these other local initiatives are encouraging them that there just might be hope that we can create this independence in the middle and answer what the majority of Americans are looking for. Because so many have left both the Republican and the Democrat parties to go to independence. So that's the big picture back in Congress and what we might hope for. The goal of resolving conflict in relationships is not victory or defeat. It is reaching understanding and letting go of our need to be right. And that's some good advice, a good quote that came from Katrina McGuire. So I leave you with that thought. And there's some of the contact information. Anyway, you've got my email down at the bottom. So let's allow for a few minutes of questions or comments. Yes, sir.
Your book just came out a year or two ago, Craig Alley and his counterpart, not his counterpart, but from the Senate side, both from the Carolinas. They enjoy having dinner every night together, and it had to do with what can we do regarding the race problem. And I found it very, very helpful. And both wrote captions in the book, coming from different directions, but yet having that common ground where they could agree on and discuss what was common. And I thought that was really great. You don't hear much of that.
No, you don't. It doesn't get much publicity. And again, it's not the best interest of either the media or the political parties to find that middle ground and facilitate meaningful conversation and problem solving. It's just an unfortunate trap that we've got ourselves into now, and how do we reverse the trend or extricate ourselves from that?
It seems like they love to stir this up for some reason at the expense of us, trying to find what, where they can get the power, the power grab. Is that what we're looking at?
Yeah. And with the tribalism, it's an all or nothing.
So we down here, that's what keeps actually going. We're kind of left on the fringes.
Yeah, and that has come up at each of the 4 workshops that I've been a part of.